Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This afternoon, this morning, I am going to be reading from my book called RIP Synergy. Now, the author is down as Len E. Hook. That's a pen name that I used. It's a bit of a play on my surname. The reason I used a pen name is because there are some issues in this story that people might find a little bit, they might find it a little bit contentious. So I chose to write the first two books in the RIP series under a pen name, and the third book is under my real name, John Quinnell. Now, the reason for this will become apparent as we go through the story. I first wrote these books to give my readers an opportunity to think about their own lives, about the interactions that they have with people in their lives, but also the interactions that may occur outside of their lives. And here I'm talking about the spirit world, the universe, guardian angels, if you believe in that kind of thing. Just basically elements of our lives that we are unaware of, but that if we take notice of them, might lead to us enriching our lives here on this planet. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to read sections of each book. I'm going to start with RIP Synergy, which is the first in the series. At certain points, I'll be stopping reading and I'll be asking some questions that you might want to think about before we go on to the next part. So this is RIP Synergy. You may or may not have seen the cover before. I realise it's backwards, but then I've got a forward facing camera. Okay, so let's get started, shall we? This is the foreword from RIP Synergy. This story is based on true events. It is an account of issues and experiences that took over my life for decades. I recorded my experiences in a journal, which was then transferred to print. I take full responsibility for the fact that this book might not be of the highest quality in all respects. But in my defence, I'm not a seasoned author. While I cannot promise that every word is true, what I can say is that I acted diligently in remaining faithful to the themes and principles so clearly laid out before me. To some degree, the story is irrelevant. It is the messages that must take precedence, and the implications that the story has for all of us. I've changed some names to protect the privacy of the individuals involved, using poetic license in some places to enhance the storyline, but the facts remain unchanged. This foreword is necessary to offer a word of warning. There is something in all our lives, something unknown in the way it acts and in the way it affects us. No race, creed, colour, religious belief, and no amount of prayer can repel the intrusion into our lives that might, one day, prove fatal. The threat to everyone is relentless. It is evil. It is deadly. You cannot hide and you cannot fight. It exists and it always has, and it always will. My only hope is that the words in this book serve to arm you with whatever defence might be available at the appropriate time. Chapter 1. Solly, what is up with you tonight? Mary had only known Solly for 2 weeks before they headed to the bedroom, but even by then she felt they had a deep connection. Not one to flaunt her sexuality, the eagerness she felt to share her body with her new beau had surprised Mary. Despite his name, Solly was not of Jewish descent. He learned at an early age that his name was just one fancied by his mother a few days before he emerged into the world, ginger-haired and blue-eyed. At 24 years of age, Solly retained his boyish good looks and a nest of wispy red hair. I don't feel good, Solly struggled to speak through tightly clenched teeth. Solly's eyes looked bugged out as he desperately clutched at the front of his white t-shirt. His knuckles rapidly whitened, and his scared eyes widened. Mary scooted away from her boyfriend and raised herself quickly from the sofa and into a standing position. She raised both hands to her head and squeezed at her hair before gesticulating crazily in front of her. "What can I do? Tell me, Solly," she cried out. Solly was not able to reply. Though impossible to in any way adequately describe the intense pain he was feeling inside his chest, he could only liken it to his insides being ripped to shreds repeatedly. He pulled his left fist up and ripped open his top. He stared wide-eyed at his chest, which showed no sign of the battle being waged inside. Solly continued to stare as he slowly rolled into a ball and fell onto the sofa. "Solly, Solly," Mary screamed as she lunged forward and shook Solly's stricken body violently in a vain attempt to erase the last 30 seconds. "Can I speak with Inspector Marchant, please?" "Who is asking, and what is it about?" The man behind the counter carried on with what he was doing without glancing up. His ginger hair looked ruffled, his cheeks slightly pinkish. His white collar was slightly crumpled on both sides where it hung over his navy blue jumper. "Can I speak with Inspector Marchant, please?" I repeated. The room was clean, but completely unwelcoming. With no light penetrating the glass in the doors, the room was lit by two low-hanging neon lights that did nothing to brighten the scuffled cream shades of the walls. Two doors led from the room, one left and one right. The counter side was accessed from the right, through a split barn-type door, only the bottom halves of which were visible. The air inside the room was trapped and slightly stale. A woman pushed open the right side door. Dressed informally, she was above medium height and slim, but not size 0 by any means. A puffed purple blouse hung over her broad shoulders, and casual black slats met unremarkable black boots at her ankles. Her dyed blonde hair was clear of her face on the left and fell slightly below her eyebrow on the right side. "Would you like to come through?" she asked. I was led rather briskly to a door on the left of a short corridor. She moved inside and took a seat on a creaky wooden swivel chair behind a modern-looking desk. She motioned for me to be seated in front of the desk. She had an A4 pad in front of her and 3 well-used biro pens. Her hands met in front of her, a pen cradled on top. "What is this about?" she asked. "Whoa, hello, how are you? Might be nice," I replied. "Let's cut the crap, shall we?" Inspector Marchant leaned forward on the desk, casting a dark shadow over pad and pen. "You gave me the runaround before, and we're here to start that business up again?" I moved in my seat, composing myself, searching for the right words to use. "Well, it wasn't quite like that, but I will admit that we got off on the wrong foot before," I replied. "We had worked together previously, albeit for a very short period of time. In reality, the case had been cold before I became involved. It was only my insistence that led to Inspector Marchant resurrecting a project that, at least at that time, should have stayed buried. But back then, my psychic abilities were less focused, less known, not as complete as they are now. As it turned out, our working together resulted in a stiff reprimand for Inspector Marchant and a charge for me of wasting police time." "So what is it now?" Marchant asked. "My time is considerably more valuable than should be spent chasing after rainbows with you. I cleared my throat and then began the tale of why I was there. You know me, Judy, I started, at least a bit. You know that I'm a psychic, sensitive, whatever people want to call me. Marchant chipped in. Look, I have much better things to do with my time. She moved her pens and shuffled her pad as if to get up from the table. The point is, Inspector Marchant, that it has started again, but this time on a much bigger scale. Before I was not ready to untie all the knots, to untangle the web of what was going on, but now I am, I replied. I felt uneasy as Inspector Marchant rose from her chair. She pointed a stiff forefinger in my direction as I too started to rise from my seat. Unless you have something concrete, like names and addresses, or unless you have anything of any material worth for me at all, she paused momentarily. Then this conversation is closed. She picked up the pens from the table and moved towards the door. I followed her. You are aware of a man who died recently of natural causes, no witnesses, and the guy was in his early 20s, I asked. She put her hand on the doorknob Marchant and said, And? I don't know, Inspector Marchant. This is the problem. But something is not right. Something is very, very not right. And something needs to be done, urgently. Inspector Marchant opened the door and almost pulled me through it with her eyes. Goodbye and thank you for coming in today. His name was Saunders, I said as I slowly made an exit from the room. The dead guy. Chapter 2. I was born in South East London in December 1963, one of 3 children. Mum, that boy's drinking and pissing a lot. My brother, maybe having the wisdom of 5 extra years on me, was the first to say something. Nobody else noticed my concave stomach and my dramatic loss of weight. My brother called me tin ribs. That is all I knew. I was taken to my general practitioner's surgery where my doctor tested my urine. We got him just in time, I remember him saying. I was admitted to hospital within 30 minutes. I was given 1 insulin injection by a nurse. Since then I've always did my own injections. Diabetes and any potential complications of the illness were never explained to me. My childhood became a case of trial and error, pretty much devoted to urine and blood sugar testing, boiling syringes and needles, and eating measured amounts of carbohydrates in food. Hypoglycemic attacks were common. 1 minute I was fine, the next I could not stand or speak and I was completely unable to communicate. At these times weird thoughts traversed my mind, having no bearing on my physical reality. These thoughts were like strange waking dreams. Everything went hazy and I most commonly got a sense of falling, drifting or floating as the world around me disappeared. At only 7 years of age, little of anything made sense to me. But as a child, diabetes was just a part of my life, so I got on with it. I was scared of the dark. My dad played a shiny blonde double bass in a band with his 2 brothers. That double bass lived in my bedroom. It never moved, but in my peripheral vision it did. I had a lot of nightmares. Each week I must have awoken with a jolt 2 or 3 times a night. There were 3 tower blocks on our estate. The monsters always towered over these concrete blocks, and they were always looking for me. I never mastered the art of running away from these monsters. The roads or walkways always became covered with the blackest, stickiest treacle. However, I did create one escape route that seemed effective. In my dreams, I knew that if I blinked 3 times I would wake up. It always worked, and the monsters never cottoned on to it. At 14 years of age, I was admitted to hospital with pancreatitis, an excruciatingly painful illness that recurred periodically. Having pancreatitis was like my stomach cramping up so much that the pain was unbearable. On this occasion, I was given intravenous pain relief and sent to a ward upstairs. While asleep, I was injected with trasolol by a male nurse. Nobody else was in attendance. I awoke and sat up in the bed. I had pins and needles in my feet and legs, a sensation which was rapidly rising through my entire body. I was cold, sweating, and desperately wanted to excrete. A second nurse ran off to return with a metal bedpan. With help, I disrobed below the waist and sat on the bedpan. The pins and needles rose up to my neck and then into my face and scalp. The need for me to excrete was immediate, urgent. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor. Somebody pushed hard into the middle of my chest, and I heard a light whoosh of air escape my lungs as I awoke. My chest was very sore. For the next 2 days I was extremely tired. I was never put on any monitors or life-saving equipment. I found out 34 years later that trasolol was withdrawn around this time because it caused adverse effects in children. According to my mother, she was never told that I had died that afternoon. My mum always believed she put her children first. She did not. She had no idea of the danger she placed me in with her choices of budget clothes, haircut, shoes and bags that she bought for me. I suffered 17 years of bullying as a result. The only way I had to evade the bullies was to stay secretly hidden inside my home. No lights, no television, making no sound. I heard my tormentors moving around outside, jumping the rear fence into the garden, banging on doors, talking about what they were going to do to me and planning ambushes. From my early school days, the name-calling and bitchiness stuck. I knew I was ugly. Whenever possible, I still avoid looking into mirrors. Until the age of 19, I avoided girls, preferring to spend time on my bed accompanied only by imagined masturbatory images and a large amount of toilet tissue. My parents divorced in 1980 after 29 years of marriage. This is where my life really started turning messy. I felt the tension that filled the air, and I heard my dad in the kitchen cursing my mum every night. My siblings sided with my mother and adopted her same aggressive posture towards our patriarch. I never did. I accepted that any problems between my mum and dad were a matter for them and not for me. My dad was a handsome man who had, I'm given to understand, a number of extramarital affairs. What my mum kept from the family was that at the same time she too was having an affair with her married boss. I didn't really know my father until he died. While alive, my dad was portrayed as a lonely figure, a man of bad intent, a man who took what he wanted regardless of the effect of his actions on other people. A womanizer, a manizer, a cross-dressing freak. Forever angry at what he was missing in his relationship with my mother, but never expressing what it was that he wanted. I always managed to maintain an objective view of my immediate family. I guess my reluctance to take sides was the reason my dad felt a lot closer to me. But it was not until he died that I realised there was a hidden, deeper side to him. This is something that maybe my family will never know, but it sits right with me. Through meditation and deep thought, I came to realise that he had a compassionate side. He did whatever he could to help people, even if he rarely got off his backside. I talked to him about all sorts of things in his last year. Through many difficult and painful years since he died. That is what I missed. And it is what I still miss now, his listening ear. Through 2 marriages, 2 children, and countless hours of domestic boredom, I travelled extensively. And in 2004 I went with my second wife to the Gambia, West Africa. A lack of natural resources, led to the Gambia being reported as the poorest country in Africa. It is also the smallest. I got involved in developing and financing some charitable projects in the country, and, using a substantial payout of leaving the civil service, I bought some land and built 2 villas close to the main tourist area. My idea was to sell these houses and use the profit to finance more philanthropic projects in rural areas. I planned to live there no more than 6 months, but the stay was extended more than 4 years beyond my target. People might believe that racism exists only against non-Caucasian people, but I experienced the other side, being treated as different everywhere I went. Then there were the marabouts, witch doctors who took money from needy people to carry out magic to deliver outcomes. Potions consist of local vegetation that must be bathed in, animal sacrifices, or simple Arabic verse wrapped and buried in the ground. Mostly as empty words, another way of making money out of an individual's fears or desires. The only marabouts who seem to have some power are those dealing with black magic, and bad things do happen, as I experienced myself. A Sierra Leonean girlfriend asked for some clothes of mine, photographs and some hair. Over the next 4 years I lost nearly everything as a result. Financially I was broke. These were the darkest and most desperate days of my life. I returned to live in the United Kingdom in 2011. My son, who was born in 2009, returned with me. My Gambian wife, after lengthy and stressful appeals against Home Office regulations, now resides with us. I was introduced to spiritual books by my second wife. She claimed she had an affinity with Buddhism, angels, God and most other types of mumbo-jumbo. In 2003, during a break in our marriage, I visited my wife at a place she was renting. She came back from work and placed a book in front of me on a coffee table. Just then, the phone rang and she went to the kitchen to answer the call. I sat and I sat and I sat a bit more. After 30 minutes I picked up the book. It was about a man who had directly conversed with God. I started reading the book and found I could not put it down. From there I read every spiritual book I could find. I was particularly interested in accounts of our wider spiritual identity, the afterlife, past lives, and in spirit guides and higher beings. I had an interest in the paranormal since reading horrific tales on holiday in my pre-teens, and this seemed like a natural progression. I began to meditate, and after a while I found it quite easy to relax and let go. I brought meditative compact discs and looked into self-development literature. I always believed in a God figure, but I was not religious in any way. I could not stand the doctrine of organised religion. I had a problem accepting the fear that commonly pervaded religious teaching. I do not tend to believe in anything unless it is proven to me. So I started testing the theology of spiritual writing. It seemed to me that God was not a thing to be scared of, not even something to be in awe of, but more a partner, a companion, a fixer, a trader. So I started asking for proof in each section of every book I read, and by and large I found it. I never followed spiritual text, rather I used it to inform my own analysis of the non-physical. I never believed anyone who said, "This is the way it is," because almost certainly it is not, and it seems to me this kind of directive has religious rather than spiritual overtones. I've never been into preaching of any kind, and it just seemed to me that most of the spiritual texts available on the market preached what an individual author thought was right, rather than encouraging a reader to find his or her own truth. As an illustration, I was on holiday in Turkey, reading a book that suggested we and God are one and the same. Facing a deep blue sea, I looked up from the book and noticed a cloud formation on my right that looked suspiciously like steps. I then noticed more clouds that formed to my left, almost exactly the words "I am." 2 weeks later, my wife was upstairs in the bathroom and heard a soft crash. Nothing new in that, since she had a tendency, like many other people, to pay little attention to her surroundings. 10 minutes later, I visited the bathroom. A small bowl of potpourri that usually sat on the edge of the bath had tipped inside. My wife had removed the bowl, leaving the dried potpourri leaves where they had spilt. I looked at the leaves scrambled haphazardly across the bottom of the bath, the brown, the red and the green. I was looking for a message, but could see none. I turned away from the bath and towards the window. Fixed to the wall was an extendable shaving mirror. At that moment I wondered if I would see anything if I pointed the mirror down towards the inside of the bathtub. In the mirror's reflection, I saw very clearly "your," Y-O-U-R, which could also be interpreted as "you are." I had the proof of what I was reading. I am, you are. Many other similar experiences followed, sufficient to prove to me beyond any doubt that a creator-type something does exist. I cannot say that any of my experiences are right or the truth, for anyone but me. But I was now on a quest of self and universal discovery. The signs were all there, I just needed to take notice. This journey dissolved my second marriage. I felt like my entire self expanded. I grew self-knowledgeable, and as a consequence my entire life philosophies up to that time were gently erased and replaced. I felt I had turned the physical into the non-physical. Reading books was no longer good enough. I craved the experiences and the proof of our universal selves. My wife stuck to reading and theorising. The two could not exist together. Next chapter. Inspector Marchant called me 3 days after I visited her office. She said she needed more information on an informal basis. She apologised for adopting an abrupt attitude at her workplace and assured me it was a necessary trait in her line of work. I had no idea why she changed her mind. I didn't ask the question and she offered no answer. I'm a little surprised you called. Well, you either know the dead guy's name because you know him, or because you killed him, she replied. It's neither. That's what I thought. So tell me about your psychic abilities. That is why you contacted me, isn't it? There is not much to tell, I replied. Marchant's eyebrows lowered into a mini frown. Come on. After our debacle before, you at least owe me that. And a bit more, I added. If you want me to listen to what you have to say, and God forbid to become involved, then you ought to lay it on the line for me. You are very candid about your life experiences. Now open up about the mystical you, the you who came knocking on my door again after so long, she demanded gently. I sighed and then began to search for the right words to use. The words to describe feelings, instinct, knowledge. The words my host might understand, and that might help to make the mystical, the otherworldly, feel real. Do you believe in flying saucers? I asked. What kind of a question is that? I asked about your psychic abilities, not little green bug-eyed men. I will tell you how I can tap into information that might otherwise seem not to exist. But in order to do that, we first need to establish a basic understanding of our non-physical existence, I explained. Okay, I'm all ears. But not all brain, not yet, she replied. Do you believe that some form of intelligent life might exist out there in the vast reaches of space, possibly further away than we might at the moment be capable of perceiving? I asked. Yes. Her answer was surprisingly swift, confident. If you hold this view, then you might be open to believing what I'm about to tell you. Excuse me. Many people believe that what a psychic perceives are ghosts. This is not strictly true. Now, I should start off by telling you that anything I cannot be perceived as the truth. Anything I say cannot be perceived as the truth. Martian's eyebrows lifted as I said this. This is only my truth, my own personal ideas and feelings, because, in effect, there is no absolute truth, I explained. There is no proof that ghosts or spirits exist. There is no absolute proof that an afterlife exists. There is no proof that God exists, right? Inspector Marchant asked. Right, I acknowledged. So I'm just cautioning you that anything I have to say cannot be 100% relied on, and most certainly would not stand up in court. Well, that's a shame. I'm much more used to dealing with courts than with hocus pocus. In any case, I left my notebook back at the office, Inspector Marchant replied sullenly. From the start, let's stay away from ghosts. In my opinion, a ghost, or a ghostly energy, might just be an imprint of a historical event or a historical character that more often than not occupies a space on our planet. It might well be true that ghosts can interact with people by touch, smell or speech, but this still emanates from that energetic imprint of another time, or of another event. I've no doubt that many people do have ghostly experiences, but these are neither psychic nor mediumistic. Any psychic or medium who claims to see or hear a spirit as if it's a physical being is only doing that for effect, maybe so that a client or audience can more easily focus on the message being given. But in my opinion, any such action is just theatrical. So if you don't see or hear a ghost, spirit or spiritual energy, I corrected. If you don't see or hear a spiritual energy, then how can you pick up messages, scenes, or whatever it is that you pick up from these otherworldly energies? I don't know. I mean, I can't be sure. I don't know how any channels of communication work, and I don't think I'm meant to know. These people who write books giving definitive answers to our existence, what will happen when we die, who will meet us, what happens next, it's all just their opinions. None of it is true. None of it, she asked. None of it, except for that which we ourselves choose to believe, or that which sits right for us as individuals, I explained. So what are you saying? God is made up? The Bible is full of cack? Are you saying there is no reason why we exist? No, that's not what I'm saying. There are somewhere in excess of 7 billion gods, or creators, or spiritual deities, or nothings. And each version must be correct to be believable, right? I guess so, Marshall was frowning again. All I'm saying, in a nutshell, is that each person's experience or belief in a god, or any other creative energy, cannot ever be the same. And it must be true that each of our own gods are real. It has to be. And each difference creates a new god, a new deity, or a new belief. An atheist has a god, just not one they believe in. And what if God does not exist somewhere else? What if God was here right now? What if God exists right in this space here? Marchant stared at me as she lifted her tepid coffee to her bright red lips. What if, I moved further forward in my seat, what if we are gods? What if we are the single energy that creates physical illusions all around us? What if we create physical entities, people, places, all of history as we know it? What if every single one of us is God, or a manifestation of our own godliness, an illusion, a player in somebody else's life, and puppeteer of our own? Wow, that is some thought. It might be more than just a thought. It's perfectly feasible, I suggested. My own belief is that when we die there is a common enough outcome, one ending and another beginning, or even just a continuation. I certainly think it possible that our individual beliefs will be acted out upon our physical death. Otherwise, how shocking or horrifying could the death experience really be? No, I believe it must take some readjustment. So what about those people who do not believe in God? Those that say when we die, we are buried and get eaten by the creatures of the land, Inspector Marchant asked. Then that might be exactly what they experience when they die. Marchant squirmed in her chair. Maybe readjusting her physical position also entails some movement in her metaphysical outlook too. This is a lot to take in. I'm not sure I'm ready for this. If you can, just shelf your own belief systems for a while. Put on hold all you've been told, all you have read, all you have experienced. If you can, just be open to the possibilities that might exist all around us. Can you do that? Okay, I will try. I explain the process by which I pick up on psychic intelligence. I have no idea where this information comes from, but it must emanate from somewhere beyond our everyday physical realm as we currently understand it. Although I can detect images and sounds, I do not use my 5 physical senses to do this. Instead, it comes through a knowing or a perception of an image, sound, smell or taste. Sometimes this process is enhanced by information provided by clients, or by the touching of belongings of the deceased, or by photographs of them. I begin by rubbing my hands briskly and placing them over my face. I then ask, from deep within me, for assistance in opening myself up to any images or messages meant for my client. I open up my 7 main chakra centers and imagine them turning faster and faster, drawing in an energy as they turn. To me, a chakra looks like a beautifully cut diamond, and as each one turns, it gives off its own colour. This is usually done from base to crown, or from the base of my spine to the top of my head. As each chakra turns and glistens, I feel different areas of my body open up. It is like breathing through different areas of my body. I will then hold my hands open in my lap, palms up, to receive a white or golden light that I draw down from above me. Physically, I feel that I become energized. I feel tingling sensations in my feet, my legs, my arms and in my hands. I feel a warm glow start to emanate from my body. My thinking becomes crystal clear. Sometimes my eyesight becomes a little bit blurred. This procedure sounds lengthy and detailed, but in reality, it only takes a matter of seconds. I'll stress again that I really don't know how this works, whether I read what is inside people's minds or whether they project thoughts to me, I don't know. All I know is that information does arrive. Usually I'll first pick up a bit of the person or the people I'm reading for. This happens almost instantaneously. As soon as I'm in the presence of someone, I will know how open they are, or whether they put up barriers or any other kind of resistance to communication. I will know if they're shy, withdrawn, boastful or aggressive. Sometimes I will know if they drink alcohol or if they are teetotalers. Particularly clear to me is whether they have an injury or ailment. I'll become aware of strong issues in their personality or in their makeup. It is safe to say, though, that the issues of greatest concern to my clients will always push their way to the forefront and be the clearest issues available to me. It is never easy to read for a defensive or an aggressive person, or for one who might be hostile to the work of a psychic. It can then become a bit like a game of cat and mouse. Information will still be available to me, but denials of such information or unnecessarily eager attempts to dispute information could, in some circumstances, lead to a deeper searching for answers that might not be available or might be pushed away. It is always the wish of a psychic to inform a client and thereby offer at least some degree of value for money, whether in cash or time. Deeper clarification on the information is rarely sought from my source. since the information provided would be that deemed necessary for the client. It seems those people of a negative disposition seek extra clarification to prove the psychic wrong and their negativity right. Most of these types of clients are, at least in my opinion, of an opinionated, stubborn and egotistical persuasion. What is interesting is that readings can be done for people with little or no prior knowledge of what psychic readings might entail. The same is true in a starker form with hypnosis. I started experimenting with my abilities while I lived in the Gambia, where most people have no knowledge whatsoever of Western spiritual ideologies or practices. Outcomes remain the same. Readings and hypnosis can be undertaken for anyone, regardless of their background or life experiences. And this is when it struck me that whatever abilities I had must emanate from me and not from my surroundings. While it is true that a definitive or aggressive person might disrupt the flow of information available, this might only arise from my own defensive patterns. If challenged, anyone is likely first to adopt a defensive stance, even if they then engage in more communication to clarify or explore any arising issues. Once a more open-mindedness is established, the flow of information can continue. On more than one occasion I've encountered an obstructive client and prepared to end the reading, with the full intention of closing myself down, only to find the flow of information pick up again when I least expected it. I do not consciously search for information. Whatever source this information comes from is neither directed nor governed by me. I always try to steer clear of undertaking any guesswork, but this can be inevitable if the information I get is not very clear. I am provided with knowledge of a place, a person, an incident or an object of significance. I am then able to focus better and gain greater clarification and make the source of it bolder, brighter and more understandable. It can be a little like tuning into a radio signal. You get a fuzzy outline of a station and then gently tune into the stronger signal that then comes through without interference. The term spiritual has nothing to do with religion. Each religion has its own deity, its own creator and, in many cases, its own judge and executioner. I've never followed any religion, but that does not mean that I do not have an intelligent, creative force at work in my life. And that creative force is the same for everyone, regardless of their religious beliefs or practices. It is my belief that any information I receive psychically is prompted by such a creative force. If we're all made up of energy, that energy must have an evolutionary creative passageway prompted by an issuing force. Maybe all I'm given privilege to opening up are avenues of communication with individual aspects of that creative energy force. And if that force is intellectual in nature, then it makes sense that any individual elements emanating from it must be intellectual in nature too. Are you saying that Jesus, the Buddha, Muhammad were all psychic? Marchant asked, a surprised expression on her face as she spoke. Quite possibly. It seems reasonable to suggest all of these people and many, many more will be acting as channels for the source. It also seems likely that they were intellectually open to spiritual knowledge far beyond that known or even contemplated by other people in their time. The air in the room grew noticeably cooler as the night closed in around us. And what about those people who think Jesus was an alien? I continued, raising my eyebrows. Are you serious? I guess nothing is beyond the realms of the possible. During my time experimenting with spirituality, seeking my own learning and growth, I started to ascertain that the greatest lesson of all was to try to be non-judgmental. While I cannot say I achieved this goal, I did manage to understand the judgmentalism inherent in my own personality. Any answers I found during this journey only served as signals that I was on the right path. As I mentioned before, I can never be sure that it was not my own concentrated focus on an issue that turned up the proof I thought I saw. We are all gods, as many believe, and maybe in these instances the God within me was performing personal miracles. There can never be any answers in the search for spiritual enlightenment, since personal outcomes can only ever lead to more questions. It seems to me that science will never be able to prove the existence of God, but does that mean that the Creator does not exist? Equally, it seems science cannot disprove the existence of any deity, spiritual energy, angels, or devils. But equally, that does not prove such entities do not exist. If we are able to open our minds to any possibilities, to be non-judgmental in our thoughts and deeds, to make every choice the most beneficial one, then this, it seems to me, is the only route to enlightenment. In practicing my psychic abilities, I'm not claiming enlightenment. It just means that my mind is sufficiently open to receive images and knowledge that otherwise could not be known. This is how I chanced upon the incident which led me to contact Inspector Marchant 6 months ago. And now these images, this knowledge is far stronger. It is imperative I get Marchant on side, because the upcoming journey will be arduous and possibly more dangerous than any of us can contemplate. Now, I'm going to bring my reading to a pause, and I want to ask you, your beliefs in God or in your existence, and what might happen when we pass on. How much thought can you actually give to that situation while you're living a day-to-day existence, while you're cleaning your house, while you're going to work, earning the money that you need to support yourself and your families, while you're preparing a meal which may or may not have come direct from the planet that you're living on? It's just an idea that you may want to take away with you and think about before my next instalment. Thank you very much for listening. Bye for now.